And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. I'm going to start that over. Wow. And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw, Sunday edition. I love Sundays. I've mentioned that before. Just the fact that we have two groups right after this, and normally it comes after a period of 2 days of just relaxing and kind of going through stuff. And so we're very chatty. And so the two groups after this always end up being very insightful, and they essentially drive and inspire a lot of what we talk about in the Raw episode on Monday. And so, yeah, it's always kind of an exciting day for me. Likewise, I figure we should probably get into this, but I'm going to wait for a little bit until we get a few more viewers here, because this is an announcement about some upcoming events and whatnot. We were talking just now about the intensity of this path and the fact that the ongoing conversation about this can definitely amplify and accelerate that change to a very large degree. And I said this in a video once that, accelerated spiritual change means asking why you have that belief that you're holding on to, or why you need it. And it's because all of a sudden you're opening yourself up to more and more possible growth. And so, while it's true that listening to the podcast and participating in the groups can help facilitate that, they only do so if you're willing to get something out of them. And the willingness is really it. A number of people have come into the conversations and gone, oh my God, this is so much. And they're chewing at it. And all of a sudden they're like, I got to stop for a bit. I got to just slow down. And that's fine. You can do that. But it's important to remember that a lot of it is just the fact that it feels new and your response to that. Nothing has actually changed from one moment to the other. You're still you, and reality is still reality, and nothing has changed. But it's our panic to the acceleration of our change that makes us want to cling back to what we're used to, look back at old relationships, look back at old habits, and kind of go but that's familiar. And I say this as somebody who did that. I was saying this to Andrew before we started this, that you're like, yeah, I got this. It's just being myself. It's just being in the moment. And then all of a sudden something catches your attention, like a pet peeve or something you want or something you feel you need in your life or something like that. And it's usually based on an old trigger, or it's based on an old sense of lack or an old habit, but it's familiar. And so you go and you pursue that thing, or you get caught up in it. And then you come back and you go, oh yeah, right. I could have just been present through that. And it's not that you wouldn't have dealt with it. It's just that you would have dealt with it differently. And so I think the point is that throughout all of that, it's just not getting caught up thinking that somehow if you're going through a period of accelerated change, that is somehow worse for you than it would be if you went and clung to your old habits and your old way of thinking. And I say this going through it myself all the time. And I mean that. And I go through this all the time. It's not like we don't want to cling to old perceptions of ourselves, old perceptions of people, old perceptions of the world. It's always tempting to do so, but in doing so, all you're really doing is holding on to the same old things that were causing your suffering, the same old gripes, the same old limitations, the same old self-imposed limitations in prison. And so that's it. That's really all it is just treat it lightly. You were changing to begin with. You were changing the whole time. The only thing that's different now is that you're resisting it a little less. But that said, this is why it's important to laugh. This is why I think one of my favorite episodes of Raw so far was where we got very involved with the topic of duck penises. And it was just because, why the fuck not? Right? It's just a conversation. The growth is already happening. I think that's the whole thing. We're not teaching anybody anything, and we're not really passing on a philosophy or anything else. They're already growing. You, the listener, you're already growing. You're already doing your thing. We're not doing anything outside of just being the thing that you've decided to put your focus on. And it could have been anything, but it would have been something that resonated with where you are in your path right now. Right? And so we're just shooting the shit, spending time being ourselves with others trying to do the same thing. It's just a conversation, right? It's just a conversation. The change was happening regardless of Andrew or I, regardless of the podcast or the groups. The change was happening. The only difference is that you would have found yourself, and I know, you would have found yourself asking yourself a lot more often whether or not you were crazy. You would have felt a lot more alone in the path, talking to people around you who didn't understand what you were talking about. You would have still went through the dialogue. It's just that it would have been only your voice and not the voice of so many community members that are saying the same thing, but wonderfully with different faces and different voices, and showing a vast variety of everything that we could be, but actually showing that the path is always the same. Because again, the conversation is your conversation. Whether it's happening through other people or not, it's still happening through you. So anything you get out of it comes back to you.
And there's there's an intensity to that. And even with the conversation, or people take breaks, like we tell people all the time, like, don't listen to the podcast. You don't need it. You don't need this conversation. It's just you. Comes down to you. But I find it interesting when people think the conversation is something. And so then they have an idea of it, and they, maybe don't run from it, but, take a break or whatever. And again, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But how often, because this, like, it comes down to ultimate responsibility, like everything that you're going through and feeling, you're responsible for. When you get to really seeing it, you're like, fuck, I can't pass this to anyone. I've passed this stuff to other things, situations. Oh, it's this. And we just kind of glaze over that. And there's an intensity to recognizing that it all comes from you, like your entire experience, your response to it, not necessarily the circumstances, but your experience of the circumstances. You can't pass that off to anyone else or anything else, any other situation. Like, and then there's the immediate, at least for me, realizing that there's like sometimes a judgment that comes with that, and it comes around, and then it's just buying back into, another narrative, another degree of false certainty. But without being able to pass that responsibility on to anything else, you're just left with yourself and your experience and your relationship and response to the situation that you're in. And then combine that with not being able to know with any degree of certainty what's happening. And it's like the combo can be a lot from a certain perspective, but also not a lot, because it isn't a lot unless you're making it into a lot. Like the recognition of that being the case, responsibility and uncertainty, being hand in hand, the intensity of both of them together doesn't mean anything. It's just a recognition of what's happening, but it doesn't mean it has to come with all of this idea of what it is, because your idea about what it is, trying to hold on to certainty and recognizing that everything is uncertain. It means your perspective of how heavy something is, or even what is happening right now, isn't it. It's not it. It's your perspective, a super, super limited perspective of what's happening that has very little, very, very little evidence whatsoever. And so you can't really settle on that. And it's like, fuck, I can't fucking settle on anything. And but then you're just left with yourself here and now, and your willingness to respond to the situation. But something, because for a while, for me at least, and this is just, my experience of things, like I did things for reasons, like everything that I did, like I can do a lot of things and accomplish a lot of things, but it was always from, this will make me more and better. And so now I know that that's not the case. It's like, I'm fucking relearning how to do things. 'Cause every time I wanted to accomplish something, it was, all right, what do I want to accomplish? We're gonna set up some routines for my day, and I would fucking stick to that shit. And I was disciplined as fuck, and I was able to do a lot of things. Like I was able to do things I wanted to do that I didn't think were necessarily possible, but I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna find out. And so, like, I'm just realizing how much I relied on that to do things, but then it's for this fictitious endpoint, and along the way, there isn't that same fullness and enthusiasm along the way. And so without that, I'm like, there's all the options there. And because I was very reliant, like all of my life, like I was did well in school. Like I, went to a good college, did the sports for as long as I wanted to, because I would fucking work really fucking hard to do it. But it was always with that point in mind that, oh, fuck,
I
that
gotcha. I
that
understand what you're saying. Can I save you from where you're about to go?
yeah.
All right. This is really important. This is that line where you go from should to establishing a true sense of priority. Okay? And so a lot of times when we develop those disciplines, those checklists, it's because we're trying to do things right. And we're trying to do what we think we should be doing, what would be ideal for our path and what would be ideal for us. And of course, it's based on the best advice that we could get from the people that we know and respect and the things that we want to apply to our lives and all of that. But a lot of it is based on that idea that you need more and that you're not enough already. And then you start to recognize that that's not the case. And so the priority to become more starts to slip away because you don't need to be. So now your priority has to change. And I made a video about this on Instagram, and it's about leaving shoulds behind and every moment being its own priority. You have to establish what your priority is. And I can express to you how that path went for me, and the reason that it brought me to Dualistic Unity. Because the priority became my growth. The priority became uncovering all the little corners that were still triggering me, uncovering all the little habits that were still influencing me unseen. Right? The focus, the discipline was in being myself. And that has changed a lot over the years. It took me towards martial arts for a little while. It took me towards writing and life coaching and whatnot. Because again, like I have a background doing a lot of things, from labor to computer programming and so on. So my road is twisted and kind of went in directions I didn't expect it to go. I've taken up things I never thought I would take up, that kind of thing. And it's just because moment to moment it becomes, what am I doing? What's in front of me? And what can I get out of it? What can I learn out of this about myself? About myself, right? Like, why is it worth it to consistently go to the gym, especially for somebody like you, right? Who's been going for so very long. Well, I mean, yeah, there's that part of the familiarity of it, right? But there's also the fact that it's something that you enjoy, right? Now, when you started having this discussion more often than not, you were mentioning you were having problems slip from that rigid routine into having no routine, right? See, it's not that I have no routine. Like, we have a schedule on the podcast. If I had no routine whatsoever, that wouldn't be possible, right? And so I have a routine ish. I get up and I start there. And that's pretty much it. And some mornings I work out, other mornings I don't. Other mornings maybe I'll stretch, maybe I'll just sit outside, drink a coffee, or I'll go for a walk, and it's just, how am I feeling this morning, but it's in self-honesty. That's really what it is. Like lately, for example, I've been exercising a lot more than I have in a long time. And the reason is because, frankly, my life is eased up in a number of other ways where I have more time. I have more attention that I can spend on that thing. This thing that underneath it all, I'm just like, yeah, that'd be nice to do. There'd be a bunch of benefits to doing that, and I feel that in me. It's not that I should do them, but if I had the opportunity, maybe I would, right? But it comes down to what's happening in front of me. Not do I think, what should I think, or what should I be doing? What am I doing? And what can I get out of it? That's pretty much it all the time. It's right now that's the priority. And that doesn't mean that you can't have a trajectory. It doesn't mean you can't decide to yourself that you're going to run a marathon, for example. There's nothing wrong with going, and that means I'm going to have to exercise this much. But think about it. Even right now, you've gone through quite a bit of training already to get here. But there have been days where you just weren't feeling it. And if you had scheduled all of that out, if you had mapped it out like, no, this has got to do this and this and this and this and this, you may not have listened to your body. You may have pushed yourself to a point where you hurt yourself. Right. And so all that's really happening is more sensitivity to what it is you are as you go forward. At one point, we had very little sensitivity. And so we were always looking forward to what we could become. But realizing there's nothing to become other than what you are means the sensitivity has to be what you're doing now to grow. Not what you're doing in the future to grow, not how you're going to grow when you get there, but what are you getting right now? And that's a spectrum too, based on how much you're willing to pay attention, how much you're willing to be responsible, how much you're willing to get out of your own way and listen, right? But also, and I want to drive this home, how lightly you take it. Because cognitive dissonance is a force. If you take this so seriously, you're going to do things to avoid the insights that make it more fun. Right? Like, that's the thing. You're just going to be like, I don't want to keep thinking about this. It's too much. It's not. It's just you. It's just you. And you don't have to be thinking about it. It's fun until you take it seriously. Right? Nothing has changed. And this goes back to another big thing. And I want to mention this to everyone because I know it's so tempting when you have these insights in your life to want to tell your friends and family and the people you meet, and you start to encounter this conflict with them, or they start to perceive you in a different way, and then that changes the relationship and everything starts to slip, and you're like, fuck, what am I doing wrong? Like, why should I even go down this path? You don't have to communicate every insight that you have. The point is to have it. It's not for the other person to have it. It's for you to have it so you can enjoy the people that you're with more or less, depending on who they are. And that's going to happen over time as you uncover more about who you are. But that's just part of growing up. That's just part of maturity at the end of the day. But this is it. It's the reestablishing of a priority based on a more mature understanding of yourself. See, we keep thinking that, as we've said, we're always going to think the way that we thought before. Like, all of a sudden, the drive to the future is going to be a priority forever. But that only comes until you realize that you're whole and complete. Then it's not a drive towards the future. It becomes a matter of your relationship with now. Right? And that's not to say that being whole and complete doesn't mean you can't learn new things and go in new directions. It means that you're not lacking anything as you do so. So just pay attention, give yourself fully to it.
I have a lot of thoughts. With oh man. All right, where do I even want to start? I guess so with the discipline structure versus not. Like I did, and I've talked about that. Like kind of when the podcast started, I was like, all right, I've had this rigid fucking routine for a while, not gonna have anything, was just, living and not having it, which was an entirely different experience than I was used to. And then I started incorporating more structure. And it's like part of me, kind of like you've mentioned with smoking, how it was spending so much time like, oh, I should quit. I should not. I should, maybe I can keep going. Maybe I should stop. And it's like, just stop to do it. Part of me with structure feels that way. Like and I don't know. And again, this is just me fucking, I don't know, maybe thinking about it too much, but like, is that structure to try and put responsibility onto something else that I can then follow? Or is it just a means of doing things that I want to do and a means of prioritization from a zoomed out point of view? Because like a part of me like fucking wants structure, like a thing I look at every day, and it's like, check these, and these apps, like 20 minutes each, like edit a video for an hour and do it, because that was how I lived growing up. Like it was always that, and I got a lot of shit done. And so now it's like moment to moment to moment, I don't know if like I have a hard time, like you said, your prioritization of your growth. And like I don't even know what that looks like, because it's with sensitivity to the situation that you're in also. But then it's like you get too caught up in trying to wonder what the right thing to do is, and it gets heavy as opposed to just doing shit. But then it's like, if there's no should, but then if you're feeling like you should do something, it's like, why? Like, for me, it's like, why isn't that just a priority? Like, why isn't that a priority? And I don't know. And I don't even know. Like, I want certain things to be priorities, and like, I don't know, like, you can't force something to be a priority. And so
No, but
then
you
I
can
want
decide,
structure.
right? You can
Yeah.
decide something is a priority. Like I said, I've been working out more often. That wasn't a huge priority to me for a long time. Like I walk a lot, I maintain my health to a certain degree. Now it's more of a priority. Well, why? Well, again, because it's fun, because it's something I have time to do, because it's something I want to put attention into. There's no real reason outside of that. I mean, I could be doing anything. I could watch TV, I could play video games, I could, it doesn't really matter, but it's something to do with my existence, right? Wanted to go back just a moment to something that you had said earlier, about having this discipline, or rather having, say, this structure. And again, I want to mention, like, the structure's not bad. It's when the structure's immovable that it becomes a danger. That's pretty much it. But you were asking, like, when is it something I'm leaning on, and when is it just something I'm using to express my wholeness, basically? Well, both of them are true all the time. It really depends on where you want to sit on that, Andrew. It really depends on how you want to look at it at any given time, right? The doing isn't the problem, right? It's how you look at the doing. It's okay to go, like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and that's fine. But when something comes up and it delays you, are you going to get all pissed off and frustrated about it? Right? Like, if you don't do it for a day, are you going to judge yourself for it? Are you going to judge people who don't do it? Right? That's the only thing, is that when the structure becomes a prison, right? It should never be more than some fluid idea of how you want to kind of move in a direction. That's it, right? But that's the thing, based on your priority, and that priority is you. It's you. Like, you're like, well, what does that look like? Well, what does it look like right now? In this moment, right now, we are having a conversation, and you could change the subject, right? You could decide not to have this specific conversation at all, but you're not. Well, why not? Well, because right now you have an opportunity to learn something from this, right? You have an opportunity to get something out of this conversation, but only if you pay attention, and you are. But if you got all serious and uptight about it, it'd be difficult for you to have this conversation. So, what does it mean to make the most of each moment? Just be there. Just be there and make choices, right? But make choices and stop second guessing them, because you can second guess your choices all fucking day. But you are choice. You are will. That's what you do. Just do. Right? But don't beat yourself up for not doing enough. Right? Don't whip yourself into doing more when it's something that's not within range of what your body and you are really prepared for. Like, it's about sensitivity. That's really it. Whereas when we're children, we really, like, push ourselves, and we hurt ourselves for it, don't we? Right? We push ourselves way beyond our limitations, way too fucking fast, trying to meet up to some expectation. And that's where we get all fucked up. So imagine if life was just a chance to express the same potential that we were expressing as we grew up, but without that expectation driving us to the point where we're hurting ourselves and causing conflict at the same time. Right? That's it. It's just That's all it is. All that's changed is, again, the trajectory is gone. That's it. It's not like the path is gone. It's just that the need to get somewhere beyond here is gone. It doesn't mean you're not going to continue on, right? It's important to remember that. Like, as much as you're here all the time, this keeps changing. How would you like it to change? Right? And that's based on how you change yourself or allow yourself to change.
Yeah. Oh man, and it's so crazy. Like even that statement right there puts me in that like no trajectory. There's no trajectory whatsoever. It's I guess it's understandable my fucking discomfort with that because that was a massive part of how I live my life. How most, I don't know. I can't say with any fucking certainty anything, but how a lot of people live their life with that, you know, trajectory, that idea of getting somewhere, and you're never gonna really fully see yourself if you're always on a trajectory. It's always going to be relative to something. And so like the mulling over certain things or wondering certain things, like there's no right there's no right decision. There's no right thing to do. Like fucking I have such a hesitancy of doing, it's something just going back to the structure thing, like of incorporating structure. Cause I'm like, and then but then, okay, why do you're saying that that's wrong and you have an aversion to that? It's like, just fucking do it, fucker. Just incorporate some structure and don't judge yourself if it falls apart. Like with the marathon stuff, like I do have every week, I have certain miles I run certain days. Sometimes like, today I knew I was busy. Today I was supposed to run 15 miles. Instead, I ran it on Friday and I moved some stuff around and wasn't feeling as great yesterday, even though I had a run. And so I just like slowed my pace down a little bit more, even though I had, I was supposed to keep a certain pace in the second half. I was like, yeah, but I ran 15 miles before instead of after. So usually I have an off day after the long run. So I slowed it down. It's like you can set up the structure, you can have it and just hold it loosely. But having it isn't the issue. It's your responsibility for it. It's your, willingness to be sensitive during it as you have the structure, your willingness to respond to however it plays out in the moment. It's like, why am I holding on to this right now? Is it because I think I should or because I think I have to, or can I, you know, let it go right now, prioritize my experience? But it doesn't mean that we can't do things like there's things we should avoid. It's like, oh, don't do that's like I went through this 2 years ago, the same sort of thing. It's like fucking add the structure, dude, and just respond, like take responsibility for it as you go and be willing to shift as you go. But there's like an aversion to initiating it. And it's funny. I have so many more thoughts. But
Good. No, that's it, though. I mean, it's not necessarily to say that there's no trajectory so much as the trajectory is fluid, right? Because you don't know. See, that's the thing. You don't know what's going to happen day to day. You don't. So as much as your discipline might be, helpful, it can also be super frustrating, right? Because reality doesn't give a fuck about your structure or your preferences or your discipline at all. And so it's not about not having a trajectory. It's just about not thinking that trajectory is necessarily going to pan out the way you think it will or want it to, right? And still making the most of it, right? Like, let's say, a perfect example. We had a retreat in Vancouver recently, and it was up on a hill, a fairly steep hill, and we were like, well, that's kind of uncomfortable, and we just adjusted. Everybody's just like, yeah, but we can walk, and we all just made the most of it, right? We looked at it as an opportunity to get more exercise rather than an inconvenience, right? Totally unexpected. Became actually one of the highlights of the trip. Almost everybody who went, actually, I think everybody who went has commented on the review form, loved the hikes. Because how often do you get to just go on a hike with good people and have a great conversation and really enjoy the scenery and all of that stuff? But this is it. Like, at any point we could have been like, this isn't what we had planned. Oh no. Anybody there could have went like, this isn't what I expected. Anything could have happened, but it's always about just making the most of it. right? Having kind of a loose, this is why I prefer direction to goal, right? Like I have a direction of being in better shape to some degree. Do I have a goal? Am I like trying to? I don't even have a scale. Like just to point that out. Like it's not. It's just about how I feel day to day. It really is. But I understand though that anything I feel day to day isn't necessarily going to be a consistent change if I don't continue to do it. And that's another sensitivity that develops over time, right? Patience and the ability to recognize that ripples upon ripples upon ripples are really how this works. And every moment is an opportunity to make a ripple in one direction or another. Right. But the best way that you can do that is just to do it by being yourself. Because if you're doing it and you're trying to get somewhere, what you're really doing is creating an ever deepening hole that you need to get somewhere. Right. And so again, as with everything, there's balance. As with thoughts, there's balance. Like it's not that thoughts have zero value. It's that they're never complete in themselves. In the same way that your discipline or trajectory might have value until it becomes so rigid that it contradicts reality.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not like it's never about anything we do, like any choice that we make. It's just the moment to moment willingness to take responsibility for the choice and the interactions that follow without the need to follow it for any other reason other than just no reason. Like there's no reason to continue to follow it, but it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with doing it. And like the shift, oh, it's been fucking me up. The shift, the realization that no one sees me the way I see myself. We were talking for a bit before this, but like that's been fucking me up. And part of it is like, it's like, how the fuck is that something that's an insight that I feel like I haven't ever felt before? And we've been, having this conversation for so long. It's like, but it's so fucking impactful. It changes everything because your perspective, if everyone has a different perspective of you, everyone sees you differently and you don't know the way that they see you. Like you walk down the street, everyone's seeing something different. It means that what you're seeing isn't the all and everything objective truth. And so like what the fuck are you capable of? Like without that idea, like what can you do? Because the idea is the limitation. The idea is the wall from your potential in any direction, and even the willingness to, because even if it is a positive idea, it still cuts off your sensitivity to the experience. And that's been another intense thing, is just the sensitivity and the recognition that any response is on the table at all times. Like you almost, at least for me, like feel every potential option all the time. And then it's just, I don't have to pay attention to them. I can just pay attention to where I'm at and just keep doing what I'm doing without needing to measure it in any way, shape, or form. But I sometimes downplay how much of a pull there is to respond in certain habitual ways. Like how, but I get it too, because it's been fucking 28 years of my life with a lot of fucking deeply built habits. It's like if you do something every day, respond to something every day for your entire life since you were 3 years old in a specific way, that shit runs deep. Like that is a deep, 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 deep habit. And if you're not willing to look at that, if you're not willing to take responsibility here and now for that experience, it's going to keep going. If you're not willing to look at, oh, my response isn't because of someone else. My response is my response. And it's my responsibility to respond in a certain way. But without the fucking certainty of how I'm seen or what I am, it's like, what is possible? Like, what is fucking possible if I stop seeing myself, because I've started like, and it's funny because I've, coming from the side of not a positive idea of myself, but not even like, not that intensely. And sometimes I try and fucking think about that, but there's so much of that in there, and realizing like some people see me and have a very, and I say some, like, I don't know, fucking a decent amount of people see me and have like a positive idea of me. It's not like negative. And it's like, why the fuck do I have a negative idea of me? And then the realization, because I feel part of me feels like I'm just I don't know, waking up, not in the sense of like the woo woo waking up, but literally just waking up to reality. And like, then it's like, holy fuck, social media, like I have a lot, like I have big platforms there. Like, when the fuck did that happen? Like, what the fuck is going on there? Like, I can just post a video and people will see it and they, you know, recognize me. Like, it's so fucking, I don't know. It's like, I don't know if this is even making any sense. It's irrelevant. I have no idea
No,
whether
no,
it
it's
can or
not.
can't, but
Just it's not though. So okay, so again, like it's funny because one of your earliest insights that you shared with people was, what if you're not your past? I think you're starting to take that in a little bit more. Because if you're not your past, then anything you do is just from here onward. You're not being influenced by what came before. Right. And the more you experience that, the more it really does start to change how you do everything and why you do everything. But that's the experience of it. What if you're not your past? Quote unquote Andrew. Right. And this is it. It's just uncomfortable as fuck when you're used to having that guide rail. That's all it is. But in the same way, it was uncomfortable to take your training wheels off of your bike for the first time. You're going to wobble a bit. You're going to have moments where you're like, I don't know if I can do this. Just keep pedaling. And eventually it'll even out and you'll be like, right. It's just moment to moment. And it's going to seem like the simplest thing. But to go back to your question of, like, I feel like I'm just seeing this now. No, there's a bunch of shit you had to unpack to get here. Like, everything that you're saying is a level of uncertainty that would drive a lot of people to panic. Right? Which is why you kind of still have the urge to panic a little bit. Like, it's still in there. But the point is that you couldn't have got here without the work to address the previous panic, the other panics, the other uncertainties that you've faced and learned to relax through, or what ultimately uncovered one of the deeper ones, that your perception is just not the truth. And that nobody's is. And this is what we're talking about all the time. It's the very thing that we talked about in episode 1, that your perception of the tree being its own separate thing isn't necessarily the case. Your perception of division is not necessarily the case. It's what remains. It's the same insight. It's just that it's deepening and becoming more personal now. Where it's very easy when it's conceptual. It's very easy when it's just an intellectual, philosophical, even spiritual conversation. But when it hits you, you're like, oh, it really is just me. And I really can't know anything but that. That's all I've got. It takes a while to get used to, right? Until you start to recognize that, again, it hasn't changed anything. It's always been like that, right? The only difference is that you had your head in the sand and you've still been fine, right? So taking your head out of the sand is going to be more intense because now you have all the experience of that, but you'll still be fine, right? It just takes a while to adjust. That's all. And I like how you put that, not waking up in a woo-woo sense, because that's not really waking up. Like, when I say I woke up, what I woke up to was the fact that I was the one creating the perceptions that ruined my life. It was always me, from moment to moment to moment. Not to say that changed what happened in my life, but my perception of it was what was causing most of my suffering. Because the thing happened, but then I kept it happening. In fact, I made it worse based on my perception of what it meant about me. So this is the work. This is it, is being able to live and exist without having to define yourself by where you're going or what you're becoming or anything, and still making choices based on what the possibilities are here and now. And becoming more aware of those possibilities doesn't change a thing, except your ability to empathize with people who make choices that you otherwise wouldn't have understood before. It's the benefit of expanding all of your awareness of all of the possible things that you could do right now. As soon as you let go of the habits that you hold on to, all of a sudden, all of the possible things that you could do moment to moment open up, and you start to recognize why other people do what they do. Because you're willing to look at why you would do that.
Yeah, and I think that's been helping, and that's the side of the willingness to be uncertain and be sensitive to the experiences is you see other people, but you're willing to see them and willing to not make an assumption and see, like, that's the deep end of empathy, right? Like being willing to see what they're doing and that you would do the same exact thing as they're doing, and the willingness to look at that without judgment whatsoever, without any judgment, because you realize that your judgment is just your own aversion to that. It's always just that aversion is always just your own shit. And so there's a beauty in that, but you can't just sit on one side. You can't just sit on the side of feeling good, feeling like you're, the best thing since sliced bread, and have that depth of empathy, right? Like you can't, there would be such an avoidance. And so you see that even if you are on that, maintain, and I don't even know if that's a thing, like maintaining a positive idea of yourself, as the judgment comes in, it's like that's just you judging yourself still, while on the side trying to feel like you can maintain a certainty of what you are. But the yeah, like I've spent my whole life doubting myself to some degree, and it's not to say that I have my whole life, but I'm still here. Like I got here doing that, and I'm fine, and it's fine. So like I could also not. I could also not do that and just keep stepping through stuff and not taking that narrative so seriously all the time. Just not taking it as seriously. I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that. I've done this for a while. I've still done shit. It's just with the degree of concern, with the hesitancy, with the desire to be seen in a certain way for other people to like me. And it's like, okay, but I've been trying to do that and it doesn't really change what happens at all. So I could also not care, because like, why do we ever need someone else to like us, to validate something we don't see in ourselves as an excuse to think that we're likable? Why do we need someone else to love us? Because you don't see that you're lovable. Like it's always just this external confirmation of things we can't see in ourselves. So once that stops, once you're like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck. Yeah, it's like there's so much less concern for anyone to like you or love you. It's like I don't need them to like me. I don't need anyone to see me in any certain way. It's completely irrelevant to my experience what they're going through when they interact with me or see me. And so I don't need anyone to see me in any certain way. I don't give a shit what side, but it's not from like that aggressive, and it kind of reminds me of that Patreon clip you just posted. It's not like that aggressive, like I don't give a fuck. It's just like a relaxed lack of concern. It's not like you're trying to prove anything to anyone, and because there's nothing to prove, because I felt like so much of that, at least for me, was trying to prove something to someone else, to myself, that I don't care, and that's the right way to live. And it's not about not caring, it's just not being concerned, knowing that you can't know. Because when you don't care about what they think, there's still a degree of seriousness that's like for their perception of you, that you have that certainty about. You're like, yeah, they see me in this way and I don't care. Like, you don't know how the fuck they see you. You don't know how they see you. So to care would be to buy into this idea that you do, and you can't, and you don't. You just don't know. So to be concerned is to hold on to a degree of certainty that you know even what the fuck is happening right now. Like, how people are seeing you, what you're going through, what you're dealing with, what's going on. Like, to care, to be overly concerned about that, there has to be an initial assumption that you're correct about it.
Or
And
that
if you
they
can't,
are.
or that they are, and that you're correct in your idea of what they're thinking, and you can't be, you don't know. And they're all seeing it from through their own lens. And so
That's
there's
not the
no,
truth, right? In
exactly.
the same way that yours is not. See, this is the whole thing, right? Like the reason I don't worry about what people perceive in me or in the way people look at me is because I know it's not the truth. Like I know it's not because I know it's not the truth when I do it. Right? That's the thing. Like the two go hand in hand. That's the reason I don't worry about judgment is because I recognize like if I'm judging, I'm just looking at myself. That's the only way that judgment works. We forget that because we want to believe our own judgment, even our judgment of ourselves. Because if my judgment about myself isn't real, then no judgment, right, has the potential to be real. But if I judge myself and those judgments hold truth, then all judgments potentially hold truth. And that's that whole fucking quagmire. Right? It's like you believe in judgment, you will suffer as such.
Yeah, exactly. It's always like, if you believe that your fucking judgment's correct, like everything has the potential to be correct. Everything comes into play. And if your judgment of other people is correct, it means your judgment is correct, or you perceive your judgment to be correct. If your judgment about anything is correct, and then anything that comes into play could be the truth. It's either total correctness or truth, or none of it's correct. None of it in silo is correct or certain or complete or sure. None of it is. None of it ever, on any part of the scale, to any degree, from any perception, none of it's ever correct. And that's the extreme of uncertainty, that you can never actually know what's going on. And so even yeah, recently, just it's like I'm starting to, with an idea of myself, like I'm recognizing that mine's not correct, because part of it is like seeing the potential other perceptions that there could be, knowing that they're not correct, but like just realizing that there's more than one. There's more than one. And I like, what the fuck? I've said that before. Like I've recognized, I made videos about how like everyone has a different idea of you, so yours isn't correct. That shit did not sink in until
It did,
recently.
though. It's how you got here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's part of it. It's all a component. It's not like it just popped out of nowhere. It's not like anything pops out of nowhere. Like they do and they don't, right? It's like they pop out of nowhere, but they're not. It's like a depth to it, digging in to certain insights. And so even me saying that myself, it's kind of like how I've used to listen to Alan Watts a lot and had no fucking idea what he was talking about, but I just kept listening. And I didn't think at that point, I was like, oh, I wasn't taking any of that in. It's like I was. And it just didn't settle for a few years or whatever, and then impacted by other things. And it's not like a direct impact ever. It's just a component of you unfolding, but that realization that, you know, no one, like there are multiple perceptions, and I can't know. It's like something was ripped out from under me. That's sort of the feeling. It was this thing I was standing on, that my perception is true, and it's not. And that's something else I've said a million times. And I have understood that or recognized it to a degree, but then I'm like, fuck, do I even recognize it right now? And it's like, stop fucking thinking about it. Like, it's just that it's there. It's another thing to look at, and it's just my certainty that was getting in the way of that insight that I can't be certain ever.
And I really want to point out here, this is what I deal with every day. Get that? Like, it's not something that changes. It's just something that you get better at. Right? Like, to me, all of my perceptions of division are questionable. Right? And what's amazing to me is that the more I've had the courage to question them, the more I've come to a point where dualistic unity was possible and then started to grow. And based on what? Based on me not being in the way of what's already there, a unifying factor in humility and being yourself alone. But to do that, you have to be willing to question everything, all of your assumptions, all of the assumptions that make you afraid, that make you put up walls, that make you push people away, that make you want to get them somewhere. All of it. So yeah, it's the same thing for me. It's just that the perceptions have deepened, right? Like, you start to recognize how many perceptions of division you've had over time, and once you're willing to question perception itself, then it's really just letting go of the perceptions that you've become comfortable holding on to, right? And that's a step-by-step thing. That's not something that you can do all at once, or would you want to at all, right? It really just becomes going into situations and being fresh, acting with fresh eyes. Like, even with people that you've seen 1,000 times, it's like the first time this is happening, and you feel like a first time it's you being there, because it is, right? And if you're not bringing the past with you, then that moment is an opportunity to just be to the best of your ability, and that's the ripple. That's what we're doing here, is just being ourselves, right? It's just that becomes more and more expensive as you let go. That's all it is. That's all it is. It doesn't change the game, and it doesn't change your ability to deal with it. A big part of this is wondering whether or not we have the ability to carry on. Like, this seems like a lot. I don't know if I can deal with this. It's just find something to laugh at for a bit. Relax. Take a walk, that kind of thing. As I've said many times, it's always tempting to take this seriously, because it seems like something that's just massive. But the more seriously you take it, the more you're kind of digging your feet into the ground and making it hard to carry on.
Yeah, and like the thought about, because even right now, you say everything at once. You may not want that. Like right now, there's moments that it hits me like I can't be certain about anything. I don't really know where I am. Like, I'm not in a location right now. Like, I'm not in this spot relative to anything. I'm just here. And without that, it's like it's your response to that. Like, are you okay with that, or are you concerned about that? And that comes down to faith in yourself, I think, is a massive component of that. Like, can I not know, and is that okay? But then it's like you're not even handling anything. You're just being. Like, there's nothing to handle. There's nothing to manage. There's not a perception to, all right, well, this is a lot. Let's tie it down and see what we can do with it, and get an idea of what it is, and drive home some certainty, and then keep moving forward. It's like, no, it's always that. Right now, I don't know who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about, where I'm at, what the fuck is going on right now. And that's okay. Just keep going. Like, who the fuck is Andrew? Like, I'm looking at my screen right now. It says Andrew on the screen. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything. It means what you think it means, which isn't it. And so, like, you're just what you are, where you are. It's not relative to anything. There is no bar to measure yourself against that's adequate. I mean, you can, but it's gonna fucking diminish your experience here and now every single time you do it. You can try to figure out how you're doing, and we'll do that moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. Everything. And I see it with people. There's someone close to me. It's like right now who's going through, it's like debilitating. It's everything, and the confirmation, like, this was a good thing to say, right? This is a good thing to do, right? And the validation, because there's no willingness to see it in themselves. Like, there's no willingness to realize, and I've spoken with them. It's like, you don't need someone else. You got this. Like, you're always in the best position to make the decision yourself, to do the thing yourself. The response that you have is the response that's perfect, that's adequate in every situation. There is no bar to measure that against. There is no right or wrong response. If you're interacting with someone else, having a conversation, to ask someone else what the best response is, it's like, who are you trying to be? What are you trying to be? What sort of sustainability is there going to be with that relationship if you're asking other people how to respond to it? It doesn't mean you can't, ask advice, ask questions and whatnot, but to put all of your weight on someone else to say what's best, it's like, it's such a short-term perspective of a situation. Like, you're not willing to be yourself right now. What do you think that's going to do? Get you to being yourself? Get you to being okay with yourself? It couldn't possibly do that. You're just you right now. If you can't be yourself right now, there's no other spot to be yourself. And that's the practice. And that's uh, another point I was thinking about before was that, like, the application versus the insight. Like, the insights are fucking easy. Easy.
And
Oh my
addictive.
god. Oh my god. Like, they don't take shit. Like, I don't mean to, like, totally fucking shit on insights, but oh my god, they're nothing compared to the application. Absolutely jack fucking shit. This conversation versus the application of what you're talking about. Anyone can talk. Anyone can say shit. Anyone can talk about stuff and be like, "Oh yeah, it's it's no division. Yeah, division is just a perception. I'm not what I think." Or it's like, "Yeah, keep talking, fucker. Keep talking." It's like, if you can't apply it, it doesn't, like, it's not that it doesn't mean anything. It's another thing to do, but it's hit me so fucking hard. Like, it's not about the insights. The insights, because the insights, just as you said before, like, they just come down to you. Like, the insights are for you. They're not for someone else. And I think part of it for me is, like, having the insights coinciding with being on social media and having a podcast and a place where it's like, oh, insight. It's like it's like an addiction. It's like, anytime I have an insight, I'm like, how do I turn this into a video? And recently I've been like, had an aversion to it almost. It's like, I've spent all of this time putting it out there and sharing things. And it's like, just fucking take it in, bro. Like, just take it in. You don't have to prove it to anyone else. Like, do it yourself. Be it yourself.
May I recommend a change in perspective?
Sure.
So I said this early on when I got onto TikTok, because at first my daughter's like, get on TikTok, get on TikTok. And she was bothering me about it for a long time. I'm like, no, no, no. And then finally I'm like, okay, fine. And I got on, and then I recorded a few insights, and it dawned on me that you're kind of just recording parts of your journey for posterity. Like, it's kind of like a journal. It's like documentation, right? Like, if you look at it that way, it changes what you're doing. Like, instead of trying to get it across to people, which you can't. Like, you can't. It doesn't matter how clever you are, how well delivered it is, doesn't matter how good your hook is. You're not ever going to change anyone, ever, 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 ever. You can't. Okay. But what you can do is share how you're changing and give people the opportunity to see it and do what they can with it. In the same way that you can do what you can with each and every moment, you're a part of somebody else's moment. right? You don't have to worry about it, right? In fact, the ripple that you create is going to be enhanced by you not worrying about it because you're doing it for you, right? If it's a video, you're like, yeah, this is a video I'd be happy with at this point in my life, or I would have been happy with a week ago. Like that's the thing. Like, hell, if I had stumbled across this insight a week ago, I would have been stoked. Just make it for you, right? And that's the point, because you can't ever get it across. But that doesn't mean it's not worth sharing, right? Doesn't mean it's not worth putting out there. I mean, why the fuck not? Why the fuck not? Unless you're trying to prove something, which is why I'm always complaining about snake oil salesmen, right? It's because they're trying to convince people of what? That they're themselves. They know. They're just running from it, right? Like, it doesn't take any master class. There's no mantras. There's no spiritual practices you have to do. It's just the willingness. It's the willingness. And that's it. And that willingness continues to deepen your perspective and your sensitivity to everything. That's why, frankly, Andrew, I'm really like excited for you, because this is deepening for you. And at the same token, you're having a community that's kind of growing around this, that is on the same path. And they're all kind of going through the same thing to the best of their ability, based on what it is they've seen previously. Everybody's going through this. And so it's exciting to me, because I did all of this on my own, kind of in the secret, in the secret of being a parent, and just, living by myself. I didn't document any of this. I was just trying to apply it. And so I just want to say, I appreciate the fact that you could do that, or you can sit here and shoot the shit with me. And a lot of people might want to benefit from that or not. The point isn't them, right? The point is the fact that you're having this conversation, and I'm frankly, I'm just enjoying the fact that I get to participate in it with you, because that's the whole point. It's exciting to me how much you are growing, right? I could give two fucks about the podcast. It's never really been about the podcast. It's been about this conversation, because I mean, how often do I get to have this conversation with somebody who is so willing to grow and question, right? And that's it. That's it. Just do it for that. Like, it's just something to do. And the fact that now this is your full-time job, right, means that it's something that you can do and not worry about bills while you do so, right? So it's a benefit to everyone, but it's meant to be kept light. Keep it as play. At some point, it's going to change tone. At some point, this is all going to feel way lighter, and you're going to be communicating this in a totally different way, doing different things, wanting to do different things for entirely different non-reasons, right? And so just keep that in mind. Everything changes all the time. And just like the retreats are kind of an up and down process of gaining clarity and recognizing how much we've kind of been lost in other stuff, your moment to moment experience is that too. The life that you build around you is a reflection of your willingness to change. And the change that's happening in your life right now is a lot. Just keep that in mind, because you're changing a lot. You don't have to panic. You've always been changing a lot. You just weren't necessarily aware of it because you were focused on a tiny little idea of yourself that was relatively stagnant, despite all the changes that you were going through. So I just wanted to say that very quickly. I do have an announcement before the end, but I'm going to pass it to you first.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think that's a big one. The just doing it for me, like just having this conversation for me, and not seeing it as a thing that I'm talking to someone else. Like, not seeing it's like it has a way lighter tone to it. It's so much more fucking like, I don't know, like playful in a sense of just doing it. And the social media shit. It's like it's not for anyone else. It's not to change the world or help other people. It's just that's a really cool fucking opportunity to post a video, just whatever you're doing, just for the sake of posting it. And it's like whether someone sees it or not is kind of irrelevant. And because there's still like, there's definitely a big part of my fucking brain or mind, and definitely I say tongue in cheek, that holds on to other people. And like, there are other people out there to post a video to watch, and it means something, and it's for them, and doing. And I think that's, I started posting on social media. There was a undertone of that, of, oh, I'm going to share stuff because you know it's helped me, and I'll just keep sharing stuff because maybe someone else it'll resonate with. But it was a softer, like, this maybe it will, maybe it won't, whatever. It's helped me, probably will, but who knows? As opposed to now, it's definitely trended more towards, you know, this is how do I make this the most helpful? How do I make this the most, how is this gonna hit the best? And it's like so much fucking certainty in that, like so much false certainty that I have any idea how it's gonna resonate. And there's also, I think I have a lack of faith in myself, in other people, that I have a big hesitancy towards talking about, the deeper end of things on social media because I'm like, oh, I don't think anyone's gonna follow this, and that's like, I don't know. Part of it to me is like that's a super limited idea of what people can handle, but I go back and forth with that. Like, I don't. There's a lot of deeper shit, and I know you've talked about this too, that you don't post purposely, but then part of me, if it's coming from a spot where, oh, I don't think anyone's gonna understand this, then
Do it
what
anyway.
sort of, yeah,
Do it
right?
anyway.
Like, what? Yeah.
That's okay. So this goes back to what we were starting with at the beginning of this episode, that your perception's not the case. Your perception's not the case. All you know is your intention. And reality is the collective will of our intentions, right? And so if your intention is the point, then just keep pumping that out, right? It's just your intention. Just express it. What's your intention? What is your intention? Is it to help other people? You savior you? No. Then it's just to be yourself. It's just to go through this stuff because you enjoy the conversation, because you enjoy the process, because why the fuck not? You could do it in silence if you'd like to, but what fun is that? You may as well, have a conversation with people. You may as well enjoy yourself. And if you want to put yourself on video, cool. Okay? But never think that you have any impact over who's going to get what out of what you're saying. And more importantly, that it matters how many people get it. Right? One person who truly gets this changes everything in the same way that you are. And I say that wholeheartedly, man. Like, the ripples that we cause, we are causing them our entire lives. But without responsibility or awareness or sensitivity to that, we're, we're like people walking around with blindfolds causing damage just because we can't see. And then when we see, we're like, oh my God, blindfold. Where's the blindfold? And it's just because, we're suddenly aware of how much damage we've been causing, how much damage people are still causing to themselves. And then there's this temptation to think about it and dwell on it and judge it and try and do the right thing. But the whole point was that you were doing nothing wrong with the blindfold on. It's just you couldn't see what you were doing. Right? Doesn't mean you have to keep thinking about what you're doing. Just be yourself with the blindfold off. What you see will change what you do. Right? That's it. That's as complicated as it gets. We have 5 minutes left. So, everybody, we are going to continue on in a little bit here on Patreon, but I have an announcement, and this is a fairly important announcement. I'm glad everybody has joined us so far through the live stream. So thank you for being here. We had planned to do a retreat in April in Australia. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but really, I don't know. It's just not going to be possible for us to do that this April. Instead, we're going to be doing something else in April, as well as a Dualistic Unity camping trip in the summer that comes up next year. So do keep an eye out on Patreon for announcements about that. But we are not going to be going to Australia in April. That's going to be held off for approximately a year. We are going to be focusing on our Netherlands retreat, which is coming up on November 11th to November 19th. So if you were planning on joining us in Australia, I highly recommend that you join us in the Netherlands instead. It's going to be the only 9-day retreat that we do until after next summer. So this is going to be the last time to do a full retreat experience with Andrew and I until the fall? Yeah, fall of 2024. So there will be mini retreats. There will be a bunch of things happening in the States and whatnot, but the 9-day event in the Netherlands is really your last chance to have that experience with us for about a year.
Yeah, and it's gonna be a fucking blast. But yeah, no, I appreciate you getting that out there, and it's it's exciting, and we're gonna have a few others in April. We're thinking maybe around California in April instead. So there's not going to be anything. Just Australia is going to be probably pushed out about a year. But that last thing you said right before that there was nothing wrong with being blindfolded. It's just that you weren't seeing things. Like, it's just that you weren't looking at reality. There's nothing wrong with not looking at reality. It's just you're just not looking at reality. It's not about right or wrong, and how that fucking desire to be certain about what's right or wrong, good or bad, the best decision versus not, is always right there, and not looking at something isn't wrong. There's just going to be fucking consequences. Obviously, you walk down the street with your eyes closed, it's like probably going to run into some stuff. Maybe you'll get hit by a car. Like, maybe you'll trip and hit your face on the sidewalk. Like, it's not. There's nothing wrong with walking with your eyes closed down the sidewalk. It's just, if you have the option to keep them open, you might as well. You're not always going to necessarily love what you see, but at least you're seeing it. You can close your eyes, and it
And it
doesn't mean
doesn't
it's
mean
not
you won't
there.
fall. It doesn't mean you won't fall, right? It just means that when you fall, you'll know why, right? It won't just be impact, right? It'll be impact with a reason, with a certain degree of clarity. So that way, the next time, it's easier not to fall. There's nothing wrong with falling, but why fall with your eyes closed when you don't have to?
Exactly. It's and it's just, whether you're looking at it or not, it's still there. Like, everything's still going on in the same way. And if you start looking at it and think it means something about you and thinks you're sure of that, it's like it's gonna cause you to want to close your eyes, just because you're attaching it to something and a certainty. So that willingness to look, combined with the uncertainty, the depth of the uncertainty, is vital. Like, they go hand in hand. They don't have to. You don't have to necessarily look and be uncertain, but if you're looking and you're still trying to hold on to certainty, it's going to be an aversion to that. If you're and if you're willing to be uncertain, then you're looking at what's left. So it's just, if you're willing to be uncertain, then you're looking at it, and then as soon as you think you're certain about something, you're not. It's like the blindfold goes back on as soon as there's a degree of certainty. And it's like that back and forth. It's just you uncertain finding out, as opposed to you sitting in certainty trying to figure out what's going on, as opposed to recognizing that you can't know and you can just keep being it and keep finding out.
The blindness of false certainty. It's kind of like we have our blindfold on, but we have a picture that's been slid inside. So we all think like we're looking at something that's really there, but it's not. We're still just blind. And it's the reason we keep bumping into things and whatnot, right? We're still going on the path that we would be, but we're not looking at what's there. Right. So this has been a fun conversation, as it always is on Sunday. I do encourage you, everyone, to join us, patreon.com/dualistic unity if you can. And again, jump on those Netherlands retreat tickets. There are, I believe, 3 or 4 beds left in the 2 shared rooms on the 3rd floor, but there are a number of semi-private rooms, and each one of those semi-private rooms has its own bathroom. This place is going to be dope. Super excited. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.